Into January 2012. Let's get straight into forecast from your end on the local unit and where to from here, because certainly ahead of the festive season break, we had Citi saying that the real exchange rate was still trading slightly expensive to fair value and then neutral to a basket of emerging market currencies.
Hi Alishia, well thank you. It's certainly good to be back in the new year. As far as our Rand forecast is concerned, we think that the first 2 quarters of the year are still going to be quite troubling for the Rand, and that'll be primarily related to how we see things unfolding in Europe. We see that the European sovereign debt crisis won't be going anywhere anytime soon, and largely related to concerns over that and concerns over growth for the year. We think that the Rand is probably going to continue to weaken into Q2, but then will probably strengthen from that point onwards. We see some sort of resolution being reached in Europe, or certainly that's our base case scenario. The risk is that this crisis continues to drag on now in its 3rd year, but our base case is that there will be some sort of resolution towards the end of Q1, early Q2, and from that point onwards we should see the Rand start to recover.
We've seen just how that economic status risk has come to bear on the local unit, because it was looking relatively cheap compared to other commodity currencies last year, with risk off trade having led the local unit to an underperformance relative to those other commodity currencies. So to what extent are we looking at catch-up potential, Nomvuyo, if things start to progress in a more efficient and decisive manner over in the Eurozone?
Well, certainly there'd be a lot of catch-up potential there if the Eurozone crisis does come to a decisive and sort of tidy end. As you know, the Rand always tends to either outperform or underperform when we have bouts of risk aversion or risk on trade. So certainly last year, the Rand was amongst the worst performing currencies against the dollar, largely related to the spike in risk aversion that we saw in the second half of the year. So should we see a sort of orderly, tidy end to the sovereign debt crisis and some pickup in growth momentum towards the end of the year, then certainly we could see the Rand come back quite a way and possibly even end the year as far as 750.
And I ask because we've seen the commodity terms of trade having deteriorated over the last 2 months or so, and forecasts for the current account for 2012 having weakened as well. In terms of possible support factors, Nomvuyo, the short-term M&A pipeline is strong, with that Macroeconomic deal hoping to be finalized and concluded in January. To what extent do you see that offering some support, at least along with portfolio flows, of course, that became a small positive towards the end of last year as well?
Well, certainly as far as the Rand's fundamentals are concerned, they seem to be stacked towards further Rand weakness, not being very supportive at the moment at all. So when it comes to things like M&A activity or potential for portfolio inflows, that's going to be quite difficult to predict. Often what you see happening with M&A activity is that the Rand will react to the news rather than the actual event. So with the Macroeconomic deal already having been announced last year, we don't see that there's much potential for an actual reaction to the conclusion of that deal, given that there was a reaction when the news was announced. As far as portfolio flows are concerned, I think it's still a little bit too early in the year to give some indication there, but looking towards our forecast, we do see the possibility for further quantitative easing across most of the developed worlds, possibly even some rate cuts from the ECB. So that would certainly help South Africa on a rate differential basis, and we could see some support coming through for the Rand, specifically from inflows related to either the bond or equity market.
Very quickly, Nomvuyo, what about reaction to local economic data, where we've got so much of that directive being provided by international news events, primarily out of the Eurozone? Today, we're looking forward to not only vehicle sales numbers, but business confidence numbers as well.
Well, we think that the vehicle sales numbers could be of some importance, because growth concerns, of course, are still front and center of the market's mind. So anything that gives some indication as to what domestic demand conditions are like in South Africa will, of course, be closely watched. And so to that end, vehicle sales are certainly going to be quite important. We see that there's likely to have been a moderation in sales for December, but overall 2011 probably was a very good year for the vehicle sales market. So should that number disappoint, then we could see that reaction coming through from the Rand, but we are expecting a moderation in sales overall.